My name is Clara Thorne, and my story, I think, really began in the damp, earthy fragrance of my family's greenhouse. I grew up in a small town in the shadow of the Cascade Mountains, where life was measured in seasons, not quarters. My parents owned Thorne and Bloom, a nursery that was less a business and more a local institution. My father taught me that you couldn't rush growth. You couldn't command a seed to sprout or a bloom to open with spreadsheets and deadlines. You had to understand its nature, give it the right soil, the right light, and the patience to become what it was meant to be. He'd hold a seedling in his calloused hands and say, "Listen to it, Clara. Everything you need to know is right here if you're quiet enough to hear it." That philosophy of nurturing potential, of seeing the intricate root system beneath the surface, was the soil I was raised in. 2 years ago, seeking a different kind of growth, I moved to the sprawling, ambitious city of Riverbend. Its skyline, a testament to steel and human will, was a world away from the patient, green world of my childhood. I took a position as a community liaison at Meridian Solutions, a large and prestigious architectural firm. The role, as described, was to bridge the gap between our monolithic projects and the neighborhoods they would transform. I imagined it as a different kind of gardening, cultivating trust, tending to the roots of a community to ensure that what we built would flourish, not just stand. I was mistaken. My supervisor, Cynthia Morrow, was a woman who moved through the world with a clipped, unnerving efficiency. Her world was one of blueprints, budgets, and Gantt charts. To her, communities were not living ecosystems of people with histories and hopes. They were collections of stakeholders, variables to be managed, and obstacles on a project timeline. She saw connection as a liability, a messy, unpredictable element that threatened the clean lines of her projections. "Clara," she told me during my first week, her voice as cool and polished as the glass walls of her office, "your objective is to mitigate dissent and ensure project timelines are met. Community engagement is a box to be ticked. Meetings should be brief, agendas followed, and emotional tangents redirected. We are not social workers. We build structures." I tried to follow her lead. I read the procedural manuals, studied the templates for community notices, and sat in meetings where Cynthia would steamroll over the hesitant concerns of residents with a barrage of technical jargon and unwavering confidence. But my heart felt heavy, out of sync with the rigid rhythm of the firm. The project files were filled with topographical surveys and zoning regulations, but they were silent on the lives that would be altered by our work. Looking out my office window at the city below, I felt a deep sense of discord. I had been trained to listen to the whispers of a plant, and now I was being told to ignore the voices of people. My quiet rebellion began with a project in the old Millstream district, a neighborhood of brick warehouses and cobblestone alleys that was being revitalized. Meridian was designing a massive mixed-use development, and the local residents were wary. During a tense town hall meeting, a woman named Elspeth Albright, a retired teacher who kept beehives on the roof of her small apartment building, stood up. Her voice trembled slightly as she explained that the proposed height of our building would cast a shadow over her hives for most of the afternoon, threatening their survival. Cynthia, standing at the podium, offered a brisk, dismissive response. "Ma'am, our plans are in full compliance with all zoning and shadow study regulations. The project will proceed as designed." The protocol was to document the complaint and move on. The next day, I found Elspeth's address and went to see her hives. I spent an hour on that rooftop, surrounded by the gentle hum of thousands of bees, listening as she spoke about the delicate balance of her colony. She wasn't an obstacle, she was a steward of a tiny, vital world. That afternoon, I went to one of our junior architects, a young man named Ben who still had a spark of idealism in his eyes. Together, we found a solution, a minor adjustment to the building's western facade, stepping it back a few feet on the upper floors. It was a small change, barely noticeable on the grand blueprint, with a negligible impact on the budget. When I presented it to Cynthia, she stared at me, her expression a mixture of disbelief and irritation. "You spent company time on this? For a beehive?" "It's not just a beehive," I tried to explain. "It's about showing we're listening. It's about building trust. Elspeth is a respected voice in that community. If we show her we care, others will see it." Cynthia signed off on the change with a sigh of exasperation, as if indulging a petulant child. "Fine. But document the time spent. I want this deviation from protocol noted in your file." What Cynthia saw as a deviation, the Millstream district saw as a bridge. Elspeth Albright became our most vocal supporter. She told everyone how the big, faceless firm had listened to her, how they cared about something as small as her bees. The tone of the community meeting softened. People started coming to me, not with angry demands, but with thoughtful suggestions. This became my method. I treated communities not as problems to be managed, but as partners to be understood. I learned that Mr. Rossi, the owner of a third-generation Italian restaurant, was worried our new construction would disrupt the small rooftop garden where he grew the basil and tomatoes for his family's recipes. I worked with the construction foreman to adjust the schedule for the noisiest work to avoid his peak lunch and dinner hours, and I brought our lead landscape architect to consult with him on creating a better, more protected garden space in the final design. He was so grateful he started sending over trays of lasagna for the entire project team. My work wasn't about grand gestures. It was about listening, remembering what was sacred to people, and showing through small, tangible actions that their lives mattered beyond the property lines of our development. But I knew Cynthia didn't understand. I started keeping a private record of my work, a separate file I called my portfolio of connection. It wasn't a collection of metrics and timelines, it was a chronicle of the human stories behind our projects. It held photos of Elspeth's thriving hives next to the revised blueprint, a handwritten thank you note from Mr. Rossi, and testimonials from other community members whose small concerns I had taken the time to address. It was my secret garden, a place where I could document the growth that Cynthia refused to see. The tension between us was a quiet, constant hum. In our monthly reviews, she would scrutinize my reports. "Clara, your meeting durations are consistently over budget. Your notes are filled with anecdotal information that is irrelevant to the project's critical path. We need to focus on efficiency." But Cynthia, I would argue softly, our project approval times have improved. We haven't had a single formal protest filed since I started this approach. The City Council even commended our community engagement process last month. That's a direct result of building these relationships. "That's circumstantial," she would counter, her voice flat. "The firm's reputation and the quality of our designs are what matter. Your role is to enforce the process, not reinvent it." The day of reckoning arrived on a cool, overcast morning in early autumn. The firm's CEO, Mr. Alistair Finch, a man who usually remained a distant figurehead, had called a meeting with all department heads. He was reviewing the firm's annual performance, and he paused when he came to the community relations statistics. "Remarkable," he said, looking over his spectacles at the chart. "Our community approval ratings are at an all-time high. We've cut down our preliminary phase timelines by an average of 15% because we're facing less local resistance. Cynthia, whatever you're doing, it's brilliant. A model for the entire company." I watched Cynthia's face. She inclined her head, accepting the praise with a serene, practiced grace. But I saw the quick, nervous glance she shot in my direction. She knew. She knew the success was born of a philosophy she fundamentally rejected. The credit she was receiving was for a garden she had tried to pave over. That afternoon, she summoned me to her office. The glass door slid shut behind me, sealing us in a sterile silence. "Mr. Finch wants a report," she said, her voice tight. "He wants to understand the methodology behind our success so we can replicate it. He wants a firm-wide initiative." She steepled her fingers on her desk, her gaze intense. "I need you to create a comprehensive audit of your work from the past year. Every project. Every meeting, every relationship-building activity. I want to see the exact process, documented and quantifiable." A bloom of hope opened in my chest. I thought this was her way of finally trying to understand. This was my chance to show her the portfolio of connection, to make her see the vibrant ecosystem of trust one had been nurturing. I thought she was finally asking to see my garden. For 2 weeks, I poured every spare moment into the audit. It became the most beautiful, heartfelt work I had ever created. I didn't just list data points, I wove narratives. I included a short documentary video Ben had helped me make about Elspeth and her bees. I scanned Mr. Rossi's family photos from his restaurant's grand opening 60 years prior. I included audio clips of residents expressing their initial fears and then their subsequent relief and gratitude. The final document was over 60 pages long, a rich tapestry of data and humanity, proving irrefutably that our greatest return on investment came from our investment in people. It was my testament to the lessons I learned in my father's greenhouse. Cynthia scheduled the presentation in the main boardroom, a cavernous space with a long, intimidating black table and a panoramic view of the city we were reshaping. She invited not only senior management but my entire department. 20 of my colleagues filed in, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. I felt a nervous tremor in my hands, but my heart was full. I was ready to show them the roots. I began my presentation, my voice growing stronger as I walked them through the stories. I showed them the data, the reduced timelines, the positive press, the new city contracts, but I anchored it all in the human connections that made it possible. I spoke of Elspeth's bees and Mr. Rossi's basil, not as anecdotes, but as case studies in the power of listening. When I finished, a quiet, contemplative stillness filled the room. Several of my colleagues were smiling, nodding. I saw understanding in their eyes. I looked at Cynthia, my soul open and hopeful. She rose from her seat at the head of the table. She walked slowly to the front of the room, her heels clicking ominously on the polished concrete floor. She stood beside me, her eyes on my presentation screen, where a picture of Mr. Rossi's grandson tending the new rooftop herb garden was displayed. "Thank you, Clara," she said, her voice a low, chilling murmur. That was revealing. She turned to the assembled team. "It reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of our purpose. This report is a monument to inefficiency, a showcase of emotional entanglement and scope creep. This is precisely the kind of operational vulnerability we must eliminate." A cold wave washed over me. I stood frozen as she systematically, cruelly, took my work apart. Each story of connection was reframed as a failure of professional discipline. Listening was a waste of billable hours. Empathy was a risk to the budget. She was turning my garden into a wasteland before my eyes, salting the earth with her cold, corporate logic. The faces of my colleagues fell, their gazes dropping to the table, to their laps, anywhere but at me. Then she did the unthinkable. She turned to my laptop, where my entire portfolio of connection was open. "And this sentimental archive," she said, the words laced with contempt, "is a liability. It is unquantifiable, unprofessional, and has no place in the Meridian system." Her hand, steady and deliberate, moved to the mouse. I watched, my breath caught in my throat, as the cursor hovered over the folder containing 2 years of my heart's work. "Effective immediately, we are returning to standardized, efficient protocols," she announced, her voice ringing with finality. "All projects will adhere strictly to the corporate playbook. We will begin by purging this deviation." With a single, sharp click, she deleted the entire file. It was gone. The videos, the photos, the notes, the stories. Vanished. The room was so silent I could hear the faint whisper of the air conditioning. I felt a profound, hollow ache, as if a part of my own memory had been surgically removed. Cynthia looked at me, her expression one of grim triumph, expecting submission. But in that moment of utter demolition, a strange, quiet seed of clarity took root in the barren ground of my shock. She had deleted the records. She could not delete the trust. The connections didn't live on a server. They lived in the hearts of Elspeth Albright and Mr. Rossi. They were rooted in the community. As Cynthia began to lay out her new, rigid directives, my phone, lying face down on the table, vibrated softly. I glanced at the screen. The caller was Leo Vance, a brilliant architect who had left Meridian a year ago, weary of Cynthia's stifling approach. The company name read, the Hearthstone Group. My hands were trembling, but I picked it up. With a mumbled apology, I slipped out of the boardroom into the quiet reception area. The sound of Cynthia's voice faded behind the heavy door. "Clara." Leo's voice was warm, familiar, a balm to my shattered nerves. "Leo," I whispered. "I know this is terrible timing," he said, "but it's also perfect timing. A friend of mine at the firm just texted me what's happening in there." "I'm so sorry, Clara. But I'm also not surprised." I leaned my head against the cool, smooth wall, closing my eyes. "Listen to me," he continued, his voice infused with passion. "I started Hearthstone because I believe in what you do. I believe architecture should serve people, not just balance sheets. We're building a firm on a foundation of listening, on community, on the very principles she is trying to erase." He paused, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm not offering you a job, Clara. I'm offering you a partnership. Come build this with me. As head of community design. No more fighting for every small concession. No more justifying empathy. Just you, your vision, and a team that gets it. A partnership." The word wasn't just a title, it was a promise of belonging. It was a choice between a world that saw my work as a liability and one that saw it as the cornerstone. "The relationships you've built, they're with you, not with Meridian," he said gently. "If those communities choose to work with someone they trust, that's not a business transaction. It's the natural way of things. It's how a garden grows. It's how a garden grows." The words of my father. I took a deep, steadying breath. I pushed the boardroom door open and walked back inside. Cynthia stopped her lecture, annoyed by the interruption. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me. I walked quietly to my chair, picked up my notebook and my pen, and turned to face Cynthia directly. The tremor was gone. My voice, when it came, was soft, but it filled the room. "You're right, Cynthia," I said. "My work doesn't belong here." I let that hang in the air for a moment. I saw a flicker of confusion on her face. "I'm resigning from Meridian Solutions," I continued calmly. "I've accepted a position as a partner and head of community design at the Hearthstone Group." A collective, silent gasp seemed to be drawn from the room. Mr. Finch, who had been observing from the end of the table, sat bolt upright, his face a mask of sudden, dawning horror. Cynthia's perfectly composed features crumbled. A dark flush crept up her neck. "You can't do that," she stammered, her authority evaporating. "There are protocols, a notice period. My contract permits immediate resignation in the event of professional misconduct by a superior," I stated, the words feeling as solid and true as bedrock. "Publicly destroying my work and attempting to humiliate me in front of my colleagues certainly qualifies. A formal letter will be on your desk within the hour." I didn't wait for her reply. I turned and walked toward the door, feeling the weight of every gaze upon me. As I left, I didn't feel a shred of triumph or a thirst for revenge. I felt only a quiet, profound sense of peace. It was the feeling of walking out of a sterile, climate-controlled building and into a real garden, with the sun on your face and the good, rich soil waiting for you. The first few weeks at the Hearthstone Group were like a homecoming. Our office was in a restored brick building in the Millstream district, filled with natural light, sprawling green plants, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. The atmosphere wasn't one of rigid hierarchy, but of shared passion. Leo had assembled a small team of architects, designers, and planners who, like me, believed that the soul of a building was the community it served. My portfolio of connection, though deleted from Meridian servers, lived on in my memory, and it became the foundational text for our firm's entire philosophy. I made no effort to contact my old community partners. I didn't need to. I simply updated my contact information online. A week after I started, I received an email from Elspeth Albright. "Clara, my dear," it read. "I heard you've moved on to a new home. I hope they appreciate your good heart there. I was just contacted by someone from Meridian, a very brisk woman, who wanted to schedule a stakeholder follow-up. I told her I was no longer a stakeholder in their projects, but a friend of yours. I also told the city councilman on my block the same thing. Good luck with your new venture. The bees and I are cheering for you." A few days later, Mr. Rossi called. "Clara, it's Paulo Rossi. That woman, Cynthia," she called me. She said the firm values my input as a local business owner. I told her my family has been on the street for 60 years, and you're the first person from any big company who ever bothered to ask the name of my grandson. If you're building things, that's who I want to talk to. So, what is this Hearthstone? One by one, they reached out. Not because I had solicited them, but because the trust one had cultivated was with a person, not a logo. It was a quiet, organic migration. Meanwhile, I heard stories from friends still at Meridian. Cynthia was in a tailspin. Projects were stalling. The goodwill I had spent 2 years building was evaporating like morning mist. She tried to replicate my methods, but she was following a recipe without understanding the ingredients. She held community meetings with catered food and slick presentations, but she didn't listen. She saw the form, but not the substance. The edifice of her success, built on my work, was crumbling. Mr. Finch, a man who understood numbers above all, saw his timelines extending and his budget swelling with costs from project delays and community opposition. The numbers were telling him a story he could no longer ignore. About 3 months after I left, my phone rang. It was Alistair Finch. His voice, usually so resonant with authority, was thin and strained. "Clara," he said, forgoing any pleasantries. "We made a grave error." "I made an error. It has become abundantly clear that your value to this firm was immeasurable." He took a breath. "Cynthia Morrow is no longer leading the Community Relations Department. We are restructuring. I want to offer you her position. More than that, a vice presidency. Complete autonomy. A budget to build the department in your image. Whatever it takes." The offer was a stunning vindication. The very thing I had been punished for was now the prize I was being offered to return and claim. But as I listened, I didn't feel a surge of victory. I thought of the light in our Hearthstone office, of the easy laughter of my new partners, of the pot of basil from Mr. Rossi's garden that now sat on my windowsill. "Thank you, Mr. Finch," I said, and my voice was gentle. "I appreciate the offer more than you know. But I've already found a place where I don't have to fight to prove my worth. I'm already home." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I see," he said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. "Well, I wish you the best, Clara. It seems we are the ones who have suffered the loss. It has been 2 years since I walked out of that boardroom. The Hearthstone Group has grown, slowly and intentionally, like a well-tended perennial. Our name has become synonymous with a new kind of architecture in Riverbend, one that listens before it speaks. The projects with Elspeth's Bees and Mr. Rossi's restaurant became our signature case studies, featured in architectural magazines not for their design, but for their process. I heard that Cynthia left Meridian a few months after I rejected Mr. Finch's offer. She took a position at a development firm in another state, one known for its aggressive, fast-track building practices. I imagine she found a place where her philosophy was a better fit. Then, last winter, I saw her. I was at a small, independent coffee shop near the train station. It was snowing outside, the big, soft flakes muffling the sounds of the city. She was sitting alone at a small table by the window, stirring a cup of tea. She wasn't wearing one of her severe, designer power suits, but a simple wool coat. Her hair wasn't pulled back in its immaculate, tight bun. She looked quiet, smaller. The sharp, certain angles of her face seemed to have softened. She looked up and our eyes met across the room. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of something: recognition, regret, perhaps just weariness. I didn't feel anger or triumph. The bitter feelings had long since composted into something richer, more fertile. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. She held my gaze for a second longer, then looked down at her cup, breaking the contact. I paid for my coffee and walked out into the snow, the bell on the door chiming softly behind me. In the end, this was never a story about revenge. It was a story about growth. It was about learning that you cannot force your values on a place that is not fertile ground for them. Sometimes, the most courageous act of gardening is to recognize when you need to transplant yourself to a place with better soil, a place where you will be given the light you need to bloom. Cynthia didn't destroy my work when she clicked that button. She simply pruned a branch that was growing in the wrong direction, forcing me to put down new, stronger roots somewhere I could truly thrive.